Hey ladies and gentlemen of the internet, Adrian here for Digital Dojos with yet another build, log, and upgrade video. Nearly 2 weeks after we did the last one, yet here we are. So if you didn't catch the last video, in my main workstation slash gaming PC I use here at the home office and studio, I had been fortunate enough to get my hands on a Zotac OC Trinity 3080 Ti, an overkill of a card for an upgrade that I've been meaning to do as a part of like re-engineering my whole setup here at home. I got the new LG C1 recently. I wanted that to be one of my main displays as a part of the setup. Thus, the 3080 Ti came at a perfect time. And with that, my only real bottlenecks at that point were my CPU. So nearly 2 weeks later, here we have the AMD Ryzen 9 series, or 5000 series Ryzen 9 5950x. Went all out, decided just to kind of get one of the top of the line CPUs, at least on the consumer end, outside of things like Threadripper and so on. We're going to be throwing that in the system today. Alongside that, I picked up some thermal compound, some thermal paste, additional air RGB2 fan for my NZXT H710i that I'm building in to replace my current rear exhaust fan. And excited about this. This is actually what I originally went to the store with and ended up walking away with much more. But I picked up a KeyChron Q1 mechanical keyboard. Really excited about this. This is actually going in my office for like our business versus the home office, but nonetheless, we'll unbox that today. At this point, the CPU, while that was my bottleneck after throwing the 3080 Ti in, I want to be explicit in stating that the 3700X is still an all-around great CPU. It's been a great processor ever since I threw my 3080 Ti in it. Gaming performance has been ridiculous, and the CPU hasn't really been holding me back in aspects when it comes to gaming. When you talk about GPU-CPU combos, at that point, when you're gaming in 4K and all of that, like the 3080 Ti is really what's taking on the load there, not the CPUs. Like I don't expect to see crazy frame differences from the 3700X to the 5950X, but where this will come in handy and will make a big difference is things like multitasking, video editing, and other tasks outside of gaming. Yes, it'll benefit that, but like the true, doubling the core count to 16 cores and all this different stuff, that's where the real headroom and horsepower will be noticed, right? In upgrading to this 9 series 5950X. Yeah, definitely just kind of go all in in terms of the upgrade. So here we are. We're going to be doing that today, and yeah, let's jump right into it. First things first, let's take a look at this KeyChron Q1 keyboard that I am super excited to be checking out. This is going to be used mainly in, like I said, my office, not here at home. But who knows? If I like this enough, which I already feel like I am going to do, I might get another Q1 here for the main office. So here it is. This thing is a hefty boy. This is the Q1 75% mech keyboard. Damn. If you know mechanical keyboards in this whole scene, you already know the kind of rabbit hole you can go down when it comes to these things. Yeah, just listen to that goodness. That is the blue switches with, again, these are already pre-installed. These are hot swappable. You can switch these out. Has some dampening foam and stuff like that already built into it. It also comes with a nice braided cable to match. It is wired, so that's the one big difference that I'm going to be having coming from the K2. But yeah, it comes with also other tool sets and stuff like that in here that you can use to swap keys. I'm going to swap this out for like the Mac button and whatnot. You have some extra dampening foam. And yeah, really excited for this kind of hobby keyboard to start playing around with and using. So let's talk about the overall upgrade process that has been this last couple of days. Starting with the main upgrade, the Ryzen 5950x, which I'm sure a lot of you are asking, why get a 5950x or upgrade from a 3700X when Ryzen 6000 is likely right around the corner and it's going to blow this thing out of the water? And you're probably right. And we already know Ryzen 6000 is coming out this year. Not exactly when, but with that in mind, look, as somebody who's been the token like upgrade cycle guy for the family and friends in my life when it comes to tech. For someone like myself who knows and realizes tech is always changing, it's always going to be something better, faster, and as somebody who's been fortunate enough to really experience a lot of different tech and kind of get the latest and greatest always, my general philosophy is buy what's best for you when it's best for you. That means your spec, that means your budget, that means like sometimes it doesn't mean just waiting around the perfect deal or the perfect time. Understandably, different people's budgets, but enjoy the thing, get the thing. If it's what's best for you, enjoy it, right? Like, oh, that could have been very bad. So this was all going well until I decided to be an idiot and try to take the CPU out with one hand because I didn't set up a tripod for the camera. And essentially what may have just occurred is the 3700 pins may have been bent or damaged. Okay, huge sigh of relief. And with that, let's go ahead and run the CPU benchmark on Geekbench for the 3700. Again, I'm more concerned about like real world experience performance than I am like just the numbers of it, but I know it's going to do better regardless. Like an upgrade is an upgrade, but this kind of at least gives me a base foundation. And here are the results with an 1159 single core score and a 7080 multi-core score, which I think is where we'll see the most improvement there when we go over to the 5950X. All right, new CPU slotted in, connected the fan. Let's go to turn on. As always, it helps turn on the power supply. Everything's seemingly turning on. Wait for the motherboard. RGB is good on the rear fan. Motherboard is on. And after all of that, and much longer than it should have taken, we are booted up. So with Geekbench ran post CPU install, we're looking at a single core score of 1576 and a multi-core score of 11,988. In comparison to the previous 1159 single core score, which again, improvement, but not drastic, whereas you truly see the multi-core score improvement from the 7,080 score to nearly 12,000 here. Okay, moving on from that, let's talk about the actual upgrade in itself with this CPU. Two things I noticed out of the bat after the upgrade: higher temps in tandem with higher fan noise and speed due to, again, accommodating for those temperatures. Now, I expected higher core temps just because the 5950X, you're quite literally doubling in cores, and you're just pushing more horsepower with the CPU in contrast to my 3700X. But my temps seem just kind of slightly out of tune. And what I mean by that is there's red areas where you should always avoid. Like, you shouldn't be idling at something like 80 to 90 degrees because that's just very hot. It makes sense under heavy workload when you're gaming or editing or doing certain tasks or stress testing it. But when you're just idling, meaning you're not really doing anything, you don't have any apps open, you maybe just booted up your desktop, that's something to be concerned about. And then there's kind of like gray area temps where like people can say the best idle temps that they get. But again, that's like a best case scenario and a gray area because there's so many variables. The room temp, what people have as coolers, are they using air coolers, AIOs, so on, so on, and so on. So there's like a range in terms of, I saw people getting as low as 35 degree idle temps to like 55 in terms of idle temps. I was in the 55 to mid 60s region out of the box, which was a bit concerning, and that's where I wanted to do some tweaks. So in my order of operations, I tweaked first the fan curve on my Kraken Z73 to kind of adjust for that and make sure that that was optimal. I then looked into other software tweaks that I can do when it comes to Ryzen, adjusting the performance plan. Also, I wanted to look into PBO and what's known as undervolting. So you have undervolting, you have overclocking. Undervolting is delivering less power to your CPU. However, there's an interesting thing with these Ryzen 5000 series where you do that in terms of energy consumption, but you actually don't really sacrifice you in terms of performance. You actually, in some cases, gain performance out of it. Now, at the 5950X, it's not as efficient in terms of what you gain out of it as the others in the lineup, but there's a lot of smarter people who did more technical breakdowns of how this all works down below. I'm going to link to the Optimum Tech video that I used to undervolt my 5950X. I basically did a negative 12 curve undervolt on my 5950X, and with PBO enabled and that undervolt, I actually saw increased performance with lower temps both on the single and multi-core. Now, these were marginal temperature degrees, like I'm talking a couple degrees off, while getting better performance. It wasn't like a drastic change, and I was still having problems where I was still idling at a higher than I like to temperature. Furthermore, it was weird because when I would stress test in game, I'd get those like mid 70s to high 70s, sometimes push 80. That's normal. However, when I was doing normal tasks, it was very sporadic. There was a time where I could easily recreate when I started downloading Steam games to test, just downloading the games, not playing the games. I was getting 80 to sometimes maxing out at 90 degrees in terms of temperatures. And I knew that wasn't like normal per se. So then I had to look at the actual hardware side. I was going to look at the thermal compound and make sure that I also applied enough pressure evenly throughout the AIO. In checking the pressure to tighten down the AIO, this happened.
Well, that's just great. Where's the other half, you ask?
The bottom left standoff decided to quite literally snap in half, rendering the cooler effectively useless, because you don't want to just use 3 of those, AM4 standoffs. You want to have perfect pressure distributed across your CPU for optimal cooling. So I was at a standstill. I was thinking, do I have to put the stock cooler on? Do I have to put my old Corsair AIO on? And just as I was about to do that, I found a spare standoff that matched kind of the perfect height, because again, you want even pressure. You don't want it to be too high in terms of like the top, and then the corner's not getting like optimal pressure. And I had to do some tweaking and jerry-rigging with that until next week, where that standoff replacement part comes in. But in doing that, I was able to at least salvage the Z73 cooler for now. And then I completely forgot to just check the thermal paste at that point, because I was so worried about breaking the AIO. But the other day, after all of that fiasco, I decided, okay, I'm going to, while the temperatures were still in an okay range, it just felt too high for me, like I said, and it was still too sporadic when doing random tasks. So it wasn't consistent enough. So I opened it up, cleaned off the thermal compound and paste as a whole, and reapplied that. This time around, I did a pentadot method because even though like the dispersion methods are tested, and a lot of people say that it doesn't really matter, it's just more so about getting enough thermal paste on there to begin with. I changed up from like the X method to the pentadot method, so 4, 1 in each corner and 1 in the middle. And I don't know if it was a combination of like just reapplying the thermal paste or getting that perfect pressure applied with the jerry-rig standoff mount, but after that test, and that was the last thing I did, my temps have been way better, and we're talking by margins of like 10 to 15 degrees better. So for example, now recording this video, I'm idling at like 58, 60 degrees, or I'm right around 58 to 60 degrees. When I'm idling, I'm around 43 to 48 degrees. So I've just drastically dropped in terms of idle temps, and then I'm not getting that consistent, or I'm getting more consistent temps throughout. I'm not getting like a sporadic jump to 80 when I'm doing nothing, for example. So that was what was most important to me, to kind of minimize that. So I'm thinking it was either the thermal paste or the application in general, where I was getting like really inconsistent temperatures. And even now when I game, I barely push like beyond 70, and in my benchmark stress test, barely pushing beyond 70 in terms of like temps. So overall, I'm really happy with where I've ended up in the temperature zone when it came to the 5950X. A couple other tips: I would recommend going off of Ryzen Master. Download Ryzen Master, use that as your kind of baseline or your source of truth for the temps. So again, some useful tips for you out there who may be doing a similar upgrade. Outside of the AMD fiasco, everything else went solid. Like I said, we did the TV mounting. We got the C1 OLED up there. And with the C1 OLED, I decided, since I'm going to be mounting it anyway and seeing how I like that, I was going to go all out. And when I got the mount, I picked up a couple more Philips Hue play bars for the setup. So I now have a total of 5 at this desk alone, not to mention the LED strips. And while I was picking that up, I saw this on the store shelves as well. And that speaks to my kind of, sporadic purchase habits. But this is the HDMI sync box by Philips Hue. I've actually been trying to get my hands on this for quite some time. It's always out of stock, and there's always like a long wait for it. But for some reason, they just stocked like a bunch of them the day I went into the store and got my TV mount. So pick that up. What that is that essentially you hook up your HDMI devices to it. So it can be cable boxes, Apple TVs, or gaming consoles. You hook one HDMI master out to your TV, and it syncs with whatever content you have going into the sync box, and syncs it up with your Philips Hue lights. Now, for me in particular, I've been a Philips Hue user for the last like 4 or 5 years. I've accumulated a lot of bulbs and lights and strips that I just stayed in that ecosystem. There are some great alternatives that do something similar like Govee or LifeX and so on, that if you want to save a buck, definitely look at those routes. They have some alternatives to doing the same kind of sync technology. But for the TV, the sync box is something I've just always wanted. But at 200 plus bucks, it is an expensive accessory to have, not to mention the lights in themselves. So I've set mine up currently in the living room just to test with my PS5 and whatnot. It's hooked up to my LG OLED 65-inch that has the gradient lights on the back of it. So it really kind of ties in the immersion and the ecosystem. And as you can see here, it's just a really cool looking experience for movies and gaming and whatnot. So I'm really excited to utilize that. With that, I'm really excited how the setup is coming along. Just like looking at it right now, sitting in front of it, it's a really, really just, it's crazy. It's a crazy setup from the specs of the machine to everything I got in front of me, and we're not anywhere near done. We're still perfecting it. I'm still going to actually adjust the C1 mount here. We mounted it where I thought would be ideal because I was accommodating for space for a sound bar below and stuff like that. But now, having lived in it with, in the last couple of days, I think I do want it just a tad lower because I'm not really going to be ever gaming on the OLED when I'm physically at the desk. Like if I'm playing games on my mouse and keyboard, I'm probably going to be using my center monitor to do that. I'm using the OLED for when I'm gaming with a controller, and ideally I'm going to be sitting like way back here if I'm gaming, so I get a better angle and more optimal viewing, and it's more comfortable when I'm gaming, so I'm not like just craning my neck straight up, right? Shout out to TV's Too High on Reddit. But yeah, I definitely need to lower mine just a tad, and we'll be doing that hopefully this week to get it more optimal and tying this setup kind of all in together. But yeah, as always, I'm always excited to kind of add more to the setup and kind of get it to, not quite perfection, but just, taking it to the next level, seeing what I can do, and always pushing the boundaries of what's out there. So as always, ladies and gentlemen, coming from somebody who used to do these Tour of a Geek's Room videos back like 10, 13, 14 years ago, hope you enjoyed this upgrade video. Hope it's helped you out, give you some insight, and stay tuned because there's definitely more to come down the road. And again, thanks for watching.